There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sharon the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am, outdoors. Is this my first al fresco? No, I don't think so. I think I did one 2 weeks ago, didn't I? But this is the first time that I've lugged my chair out because I really can't deal with staring into the sunlight. Never mind that the light is way too bright for my aging, spotted complexion, so I need the shade for a bunch of different reasons. It's a little cool this morning, so in my short sleeves I wore this one. I think it's Lindy that loves this of all my blouses. The blouse that I expected to be delivered this week has just left Burnaby, and probably by bus, so I should have it by next week. It hasn't, I guess it's not actually taking any longer than the last one I ordered from China, so I shouldn't complain. This mic works really well with my iPhone, so that you can't hear the wind rustling through the leaves, or at least not as loudly, or if any geese waddle by, then honk at me, you probably won't hear that nearly as bad. When I use my much newer, more powerful video camera on my iPad, it does pick up without a mic, and I've never found a mic that works with it to the degree that this one does. With my iPhone, and I have anyway, enough about that, So I think for my outdoor videos, this is the way to go. I have news. It's not going to be a major breaking news for those of you who tuned in last week, but since we last met, I have booked Kenji's ticket. He's coming September 11th, and I realize that's kind of a bad day in history, but who cares about that? He's coming! I booked the ticket! It's for sure! There's always a chance I might need a delay or something, but I hope not. I don't think I could wait another day, so I'm very, very excited about that. So that's my big news. But I guess the universe gave me its comeuppance a couple days later. Wednesday, maybe? Yeah, Wednesday. Just before I was going to have a really fun Zoom chat with a dear BookTube friend, and I'll keep you in suspense because we've got it. Oh, we haven't rescheduled it, so if you're watching, secret guest, I will be in touch with you as soon as I get my Friday reads posted to reschedule. But water was leaking at a really rapid clip through the vent in the ceiling in my bathroom, and that was just awful. So I had to. It took about 2 hours. It took almost an hour for the maintenance people to get over to my house, and then they found out that the person's washing machine up above was leaking and it was no good, and they'd have to replace it. I just had my washing machine replaced a few months ago, and that was the cause of the leak, and it stopped, and there was a little bit of drama that ended rather anticlimactically, but there was a bit of drama nonetheless. Other than that, it's been a very smooth week, and I don't have any other... Oh, there, the wind has just totally stopped for a minute. I'm going to be interested on the video to see if you can hear a difference. That's my personal news, and the first part was excellent. My husband will be here, the 2-3 months or whatever will fly by, so... All right, no new Patreons this week, and here is the weekend review. So, Bernie, did you like this book?
I did. I liked it. I didn't it's not like my favorite book of all time, but I liked it enough. I really appreciated how this author got into the psyche of her child character. I found that very interesting, very, very relatable, and also like subversive to how we typically think of children.
It started as a site for me to talk about like the hot topics in literary discourse, but also talk about literary hotties. So every so often when an author is a hottie, I'll be like, oh, I love their writing, or do I like them? And then it turns into a whole detour. So you never know what you're going to get that week.
Can you give us an example?
The writer who we're going to be talking about today, for instance, I have a huge crush on this guy. You'll find out. Your viewers will find out in a few minutes.
Here is a book that I picked up for about $5 or $6 from bookoutlet.ca. The Easter Parade by Richard Yates, published 1976. I've never seen a picture of Richard Yates. That's what he looked like. I am jealous of all his hair. And by the way, I was a little dismayed when I looked at it that it was stained or something, but that is part of the illustration. That's the smoke coming out of the chimneys. All right, well, I've had I would say overall a really excellent reading week, and I have finished 2 books, and I don't know how many I started. You'll find out when I go through them. I'm not very organized, especially having to hold the mic in my hand. So anyway, I've started a bunch and no bail. Oh no, well, 1 bail or maybe 2 bails. I forgot about that actually. I actually kind of bailed on 2 audiobooks, but I'm not counting the first one as a bail. When I was walking over to Mum and Dad's last Sunday, I think, for dinner or lunch or something, breakfast maybe. Anyway, I started listening to Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume on audio, and I really disliked the audio narration. That's the problem for me with a 5-minute preview. It's not enough time for me to know whether I'm going to get along with the audio narrator. So I didn't like the voice at all, and to be honest, I really didn't like the story. I'm not the target audience. It's a much-loved book. I think I loved it when I was a teenager, but I certainly wasn't going to listen to it anymore after that. But I'm not counting that as a bail, because I just, it was 20 minutes of listening. Then I went to my next choice, which was How to Pronounce Knife by Souvankham Thammavongsa. And I really, really was deeply unimpressed by the first 3 stories, and so that I am counting as a bail. I thought they were just silly and uninteresting, narratively simplistic, and this is like cotton candy. What is this? So no, that didn't work out, and it's a much-loved book. I think it won something, Governor General's Award maybe. I thought it was trite. I need a little table as well as the chair because I don't know where to put stuff. So that was my bail. I have finished 2, and I'm going to keep you in suspense in large part about the Sharon Butala novel that I finished reading this week. Its pub date is the end of May. The title is Leaving Wisdom, and it's coming out from Thistledown Press in Saskatoon at the end of May, and I finished reading it just in time to have a Zoom interview with the author, Sharon Butala, who lives in Calgary now. And we had a wonderful chat. I'm going to have that interview ready to post on my channel just a day or 2 before the pub date. But I will say a little bit now. It's a really great novel that I think many of you would enjoy. I have checked, and it will be available in the UK and the States. And I really enjoyed it. It's about a newly retired social worker who, after suffering a near-fatal concussion, decides to leave Calgary and go home to the hometown that she left at the age of 15 and never returned to, and buy a ramshackle house in the little village and come to terms with her past. It's a very simplistic description of the plot, but that's basically what it is. But Sharon Butala manages to encompass all of 20th century history in this story in a way that takes on that proverb, that expression, there's no place like home, and kind of turns it on its head. There's no place in the world where home is not implicated in all the atrocities going on anywhere else in the world. I don't know how articulate that is, but hopefully I do a better job than that of describing the novel in my chat with Sharon Butala. But it was a wonderful chat, so stay tuned for that. For now, that's all I will say about the book. The other one, much less successful. I finally finished this 100-page novella, or whatever the hell it is, Yann, Andréa, Steiner by Marguerite Duras, translated from the French by Marc Polizzotti. This was not a good introduction to Marguerite Duras' writing, not at all. It was opaque, it was disjointed, I thought, and at least 2 reviews that I found online said, this is not the place to start with Marguerite Duras, and it's for hardcore Marguerite Duras fans only. And yes, I would second all that, but it was really well written / translated, and the true part of the story is that she spent the last decade of her life with a gay man or bisexual man, decades younger than her, and they did have a sexual relationship at least once that's described here. It was a really healing relationship for her at the end of her life, and he was a deeply wounded man too, and they were really good for each other. I would have preferred a more straightforward account of that relationship, but instead she goes off into the surreal plot of a novel that she never did write about the Holocaust, but she embeds wispy excerpts from that in a way that didn't make any sense to me. Her lover, Yann Andréa Steiner, was really coaxing her to finally write that novel, and as far as I'm aware, she never did. But those excerpts are here, and it's not seamless. It just kind of jumps from... In fact, there's nothing really about Yann, Andréa, Steiner after the first 30 pages. And then we get these kind of surreal excerpts. And then there's something about a kid on the beach. I started to wonder, is this Yann, Andréa, Steiner as a boy? And apparently, that's one reading of the book. He's a refugee, and I don't even know where this must be happening somewhere in France. That wasn't obvious to me. This is such a little book, but just the way I'm holding it, it's hurting my thumb, so I'm going to put it down. And his camp counselor, it's a summer camp for Jewish refugees just after the war in France. And whether it's Yann, Andréa, Steiner or not, the implication is that it is. His 18-year-old, he's 6. And his 18-year-old counselor falls in love with him, female counselor falls in love with him, and says, in 10 years, let's meet and make love. When he's 16 and she's however old she'd be. I don't know. It was a little strange. I didn't get it. It didn't work for me at all, but it didn't put me off trying some of Marguerite Duras's better-known works, The Lover, right? Is that what it is? Yeah, The Lover. That's what I would try next, but I wasn't bored, but I was, from page 1 to the page 103 or whatever, I was utterly confused. That's maybe a theme of today's Friday Reads. All right, so I have started a bunch. I think it's time to pull out the iPad here and just do a check. Yes, not including the Bales I've told you about. I have started 4 others. This is a Bear Library book. Put it down and put the cover up. Casualties of Peace by Edna O'Brien, her 1966 novel. This is the second novel that she wrote after the trilogy, the Country Girls trilogy. And this is weird, but it's really interesting. So, segue from the last one. I was so confused, and I feel a little embarrassed that my buddy reading partner, who's much smarter than I knew that already, she wasn't nearly as confused as I was. But the confusion that I had was, there's 2 female characters living in the same house. Willa, who's not married, and Patsy, who is married, and on the verge of leaving her husband for another man. And the relationship between Willa and Patsy I couldn't get clear, and it wasn't until I Googled some reviews when I got to, because I've read half the book. It's only 200 pages, a little less than 200 pages, and so I've read up to page 90, and I still couldn't get clear who are these 2 women to each other. And it turns out that Willa was the lady of the house, and Patsy was her housemaid, her maid. I'm going to put a positive spin on my confusion and just say that's one of the fascinating aspects of this novel, is the ambiguity and the equality between these 2 women. They're really good friends, and they work all day together, but it wasn't clear who was top dog and who was underdog in that relationship to me at all. I obviously missed some reference, and I feel stupid about that, but, I'm not a perfect reader, goodness, that sorted out Sonia's confusion early on, so anyway. But I still would say that their relationship is fascinating because it doesn't seem like a mistress-servant type vibe between them at all. This is a disturbing novel in the sense it portrays, Willa is having a love affair with a married Jamaican British guy, and it's, a mid-1960s portrayal of race by a white writer, and there are things that make you cringe, but so far I'm not going to describe it as a racist novel, but that obviously the characters have racial views that would have seemed perfectly normal at the time that make the reader cringe today. But that's not horribly off-putting, at least not yet. Beautifully written, and with I would say, I forgot to talk to Sonia about this when I checked in late last night. Clipped sentences, a lot of them missing subjects, and they're not kind of a first-person stream of consciousness, but just a really new style for her, and really, really well written. I think that's all I'll need to say at the outset, but I'm enjoying it. I'm confused, but certainly enjoying it. We're going to finish up the second half next week, so I should have more to say about it then. I am loving this so far, so I'm going to speak directly to Georgia and say, oh, Georgia, based on the introduction in the first story, buy it immediately. The Handsome Monk and Other Stories by Tsering Döndrup, a Tibetan writer, translated from the Tibetan by Christopher Peacock. It doesn't sound like I've read very much, but I'd read the 15-page introduction, and that took most of my reading time this week that I could allot to this book. And it was a really informative introduction. Usually I skip the introduction, but I know so little about Tibetan culture and that I wanted that context before I started the first story, and that was the right choice. It was an excellent introduction, and the first thing I learned is that Tsering Döndrup, he's the most preeminent Tibetan writer, and he's not actually Tibetan. He was born in the Mongolian enclave of what is now Tibet. He is completely 100% accepted as a Tibetan writer, but he's actually from a minority ethnicity within the region of Tibet, which is violently repressed and controlled by China. So that was interesting. And then situating his writing in terms of other Tibetan writers, none of whom I'd ever heard of, was fascinating. And I think I'm going to develop a specialty in reading more widely in Tibetan literature, because I'm already hooked. And the first story, I didn't get a chance to read the first story until just, an hour ago. And it's called The Disturbance in D Camp. And these camps, as far as I understand it, are work camps, not prison camps, but work camps, tightly controlled by the communist assholes that move with the seasons in a nomadic, they're yak herders. And there's an explicit reference to this is a newly changed system since the Chinese control was either established. My knowledge of the 20th century history of Tibet is sorely lacking. But anyway, there's a reference to it. This is the first year or first season under the new China. I'm not sure what that means. Anyway, but the leader of the camp, a bossy, seems like party functionary, he is browbeating the people he's controlling in his camp to give donations, mandatory donations, from all the people in his camp, 100 yuan per person, for the erection of a pillar in the assembly hall, and then there's a couple other things. It seems to be never ending that he's collecting, and these people don't have any money. And he says, if you don't have 100 yuan per 100 yuan, I don't know how you pronounce that, Y-U-A-N, let's just say $100. If you don't have $100 per head, then you have to give one yak per head. And most people can afford it barely, but a couple of families, they can't. And he said, if you can't afford to, then when we move in the spring, you're going to be left behind. You're not coming with us. And there's a couple of families that don't. One old geezer is so ashamed of the fact that he doesn't have money that it's not suicide, but he basically dies of his shame. And strong inference that this camp leader is pocketing some of the money, not giving it all to the temple. And then another fundraiser, so people, every time less people can afford it and they get kicked out, they get left behind. He would always say, if you can't contribute, I'm going to kick you out of the camp. And by the end, and I'm going to spoil the story because it's such a good ending. By the end, it's only this Yahoo leader and his family that are left in the camp, and everybody else he's kicked out. And so then at the end, he's the only one left standing, and so then he goes to all these ex-members of his community and say, come back to the camp now. If you don't come back to the camp, I'm going to kick you out of the camp. I'm probably not doing it justice, but it was a scream of a story with so many layers to it, political and personal. And anyway, the other thing that I've found out just looking on his Wikipedia page today is that he wrote a novel that's never been published in book form, that the Chinese assholes didn't like the politics of it. It's, I think, a historical novel about one of their many crimes against humanity that they perpetrated on the Tibetan people, and he has lost his passport. By which I rather ineloquently meant he had his passport confiscated. And I don't know if I didn't say he was under house arrest, but that he's certainly been made to suffer for writing this novel, which is, I think you can find copies online, but I didn't check it. I don't know which language, if it's ever been translated. He's my new hero, and this collection of short stories, it's starting out, it's just grabbed me. Wonderful. I should say he was born in 1961. So that's how old he is. Oh dear, I forgot to bring one of them. That was silly. Yoked with a Lamb by Molly Clavering. I forgot to bring that book. I haven't read very much. I'm really enjoying it. It's a Scottish novel published, I don't know, remember when, 40s or 50s. And it's about one of the noble families. I don't know if it's noble. I think so. I'm so bad with British class stuff. But one of the most respected families, and I think it's like the Manor family of the town, they left the community in disgrace years ago when the man left his wife and children for another woman. And now several years have gone by, and they are coming back as a family. So they've gotten back together, and there's all the town gossip. And that's the bare bones premise. The characters are already jumping off the page. I'm really enjoying the writing, but I've barely read any of it. It's for the Litzy Furrowed Middlebrow Book Club, so it's their May picks. If I'm going to get it read this month, I'm going to have to pick up the pace a lot in the coming days. Starting out great. The audiobook that I did settle on, and is it ever going well, is the audio of Afterparties, stories by Anthony Veasna. So I'm pretty much listening only, but I have the book. It's an interesting audio narrator, very Asian voice, maybe Cambodian. I can't recognize if the accent is authentically Cambodian, but the Asian accent really works. He doesn't sound like a professional audio narrator to me, and it's really well done. So it's kind of an unusual audio experience. I wasn't sure about the first story, but from the second one, and I think I'm just about to finish the third story. I love this. This is so good. I have been mistaken, and here I am sitting out in the forest sitting out on the prairie with no Wi-Fi to look it up. I'm really embarrassed. A long-term subscriber who has just supported my channel almost from the get-go, I think, corrected me that no, Anthony Veasna did not take his own life. He died of an overdose. So that's an important correction. And I'm sorry that I didn't get your name into this video. I'll put it down below. So Cambodian Americans, I don't even know what state it's set in the States. Where is it set? I think it feels like California, am I right? Yes. Something else I learned is the correct pronunciation of that evil government, that totalitarian regime in Cambodia. It's not the Khmer Rouge, but everybody in the West pronounces it Khmer. It's Khmer. And it's pronounced correctly here, and I have verified that. But nobody says it that way. It's Khmer Rouge. And Khmer is an ethnicity. You know, that's obviously a big word, and an important word in these stories. I am reading the third story now, and it's my favorite so far, and it's breaking my heart. It's about a gay son of a Cambodian American guy who has a garage, but there aren't enough Cambodians in the town to give him enough business, and white people being white people, they don't go to a Cambodian mechanic. Not enough of them. And he's such a big-hearted man that he gives huge discounts to all his Cambodians, so that the garage is really on the verge of, financial collapse. And meanwhile, this gay son is having an emotional fuck buddyship with a guy that's like 3 years older than him that he grew up with, who is not out and has a girlfriend, and everybody knows everybody. And I think the closeted gay guy is about to come out and tell his girlfriend. But sex in fiction is usually done so badly that when it's done well, in a way that makes you feel the emotions of the sex as well as appreciate that, oh, this is really hot sex, or this is really funny sex, or whatever, but you get all of that together, where all of that comes through, that is such a rare joy, and I just love the way Anthony Veasna has written the sex scenes in this short story. It's coming close to the end, and I'm getting all verklempt thinking about how it might end. So, based on the first 2 3/4 stories in the book, I'm absolutely loving this. And feeling a lot of sadness that there won't be any more from Anthony Veasna. So, that's what I finished. And I finished 2 and I'm starting 2, so I'm still not... My number of current reads is not coming down, but I hope to finish a lot of books in the coming week and only start 1, if that, next Friday, because Pride Month is coming up, and I have a really ambitious Pride Month TBR, which will be coming your way probably before next Friday. So I'm going to start 2, And this one I'm so excited about. I stumbled upon a tweet about this and then ordered a copy, told Lindy about it, she was excited about it, and so we're going to do a pseudo-buddy read. In other words, read it, no check-ins, and just meet up on Zoom to record a discussion about it. Is it Scottish? I believe the author is Scottish. Enigmatically, he is described as living in the Scottish borders. Capital S, obviously, Scottish, but capital B, borders. What does it mean to live in the Scottish borders? I will probably find out eventually. It is called With or Without Angels by Douglas Bruton. And a novella that came out this year by Fairlight Books in Oxford. And this is a work of ekphrasis, if ever there was one, which is why I knew Lindy would be interested in it. The novella is about a collaboration between a photographer and an artist, and the artist is old and dying, and this is his final project, and the photographer is documenting it, and it is full of art and photos. I believe the artist might exist in real life or is based on a real artist. So here, I'm going to put the book down and say, one of the things that serves me so well is I don't like to go into a book knowing too much about it, and I've read a lot about this, and I talked a lot about it in my Patreon book haul. And I've forgotten all those. I've forgotten everything. I've forgotten it all. So I think there's layers to this novella. I think it might all be refracted through another fictional character's eyes. I can't remember all that. On the one side, it's embarrassing that I can't remember stuff that I was really fascinated by just a month ago, but also it's an unconscious process that helps me go into a book blind. So I've been really excited to start for a long time, and now is the time. Lindy and I will be having our Zoom chat sometime next month. And finally, I have decided I am going to try to squeeze one more for the Asian Readathon in at the end of the month. This book that was part of my library book vlog, The Emperor's Orphans by Sally Ito. This is a memoir by a Japanese-Canadian poet and writer who lives in Alberta, Sally Ito. It's the memoir of her family and their experiences, in Japan and becoming immigrants to Canada. I previewed the first chapter and loved it, so I'm going to read it. All right, so that's the kind of reading week it's been. Thanks for watching.